Disabilities Special Interest Group here at BASDA, and I'm thrilled that we have two guests today joining us from AbilityNet. We've been working with them, I think, for the last 18 months on the importance of exclusivity, and what we're hoping to do in these lunch and learns over the next year or so is go through different ones, so visual, hearing, physical, mental health, and neurodivergent. So we've got about an hour. We will have plenty of time for Q&A, and if you have any questions, then raise your hand, and Adam and Rena, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, will hopefully be able to help and answer them. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you can keep yourself on mute for now, apart from obviously Anna and Adam and Rena, otherwise that would be a pointless one. And if you want to raise a question, put your hand up. Hopefully everybody knows how to do that. If you want, you can key it in, and I'm happy to ask on your behalf. And we will be recording this webinar and share it out after the meeting. So hopefully all the housekeeping's done, and I'll take a few moments to introduce Rena and Adam. So Rena is an accessibility and usability consultant at AbilityNet. You can tell I'm reading the script here, can't you? Her role involves conducting accessible audits and checks on AbilityNet's clients' websites and mobile applications. She writes detailed reports on any issues she finds and other recommendations on how to fix them. And Rena is a person with autism. She will be discussing today with Adam Tweed the barriers she faces day to day and the ways in which simple adjustments and considerations even can make a world of difference. And so Adam is also from AbilityNet. He's an innovation catalyst and is responsible for delivering consultancy, training and guidance to corporate, public sector, education and third sector. I think that should be third-party sector clients. Adam is also responsible for identifying development opportunities for internal services and external product offerings. And prior to joining AbilityNet as a needs assessor in 2016, Adam worked as a freelance technologist and trainer and assistant psychologist, carrying out expert witness, witness psychometric testing and educational assessment. We're not going to discuss that. I'll tell you what, we'll leave that in the background. And before that, worked for 12 years as an IT network manager with both industry and education. And you're a lover of all things tech and firmly believe if you can't break it, it's been designed badly. I like that attitude. Right. So as I say, it's Ask Us Anything. Rena is very happy to answer anything you may have. And we will have a full Q&A at the end. But if you have any questions as we go along, as I say, please raise your hand and you do your best to answer them. So over to you, Adam and Rena.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure where that where my bio came from. Who sent you that one? But crikey, that was long. I do apologise.
Blame Amy.
I've got a much smaller one. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us along today. Yeah, I'm innovation consultant, not innovation catalyst, although I do like the sound of that. I think that sounds much better. I'm going to just share my screen, which I should hopefully be able to do on that one. So yep, it looks like I'm good on that. And I'm going to shift you over here so I can see what's going on. And I wanted to start with just a very brief introduction to AbilityNet. So AbilityNet is a technology charity that exists to remove barriers to participation for disabled people at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing services to individuals, providing them with recommendations for assistive technology. That's through the DSA assessments and educational consultancy. As well as workplace assessments. And we do this to provide assistive technology adaptations to meet needs and also offer the consultancy that we've got down there. We also provide training to organisations, all geared towards offering an inclusive employee and customer experience. Now, today's session is an opportunity for you to ask questions. So I would ask everybody joining us to please respect everybody's right to do so without judgment. We tend to get really kind of tied up in knots when we're and anxious about saying the wrong thing or causing offence when we're talking about accessibility or disability. So I just want to make absolutely clear this is a safe space for anybody to ask any questions you want to. And also for any of the people, especially important for anybody watching this back, that has now been made clear that it's a safe space, so please don't judge anybody for asking something that you might view as offensive. That said, although we have the chat available for questions, those questions won't be anonymous. I know, Pauline, you said that people can ping questions to you. We also have Slido available if people are comfortable using that. I've also got a Slido poll here, which I can check as well. So if you've got a smartphone with you, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen at the moment, or you can go to slido.com and type in the number 632780, and that will take you to a Q&A that is anonymous, and that's also moderated as well. So if you've got anything that you're a little bit uncomfortable about saying or asking, and you don't want to be identifiable, then please use the Slido. We've done a little bit of we've done my life story and a brief introduction to Rena, so we can kind of skip that bit. But I wanted to just kind of switch over now to Rena, and as we said, I'm delighted to be joined by Rena, and it's great to be here to talk to you today, Rena, about your experience as someone who doesn't identify as neurotypical. So can I just ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do beyond, you know, a kind of summary of a summary, if you like, of what was just talked about.
So my name's Rena. For anyone who can't see pictures on the screen, I'm in my mid-20s. I have blue hair, although it's not long anymore. I chopped it all off. As Pauline said, I audit websites. In my spare time, I also study with the Open University for a computing and IT degree, which I've been doing since 2017, and it's dragging on a bit now. And I also go rock climbing, and I crochet cute little toys, because why not?
So you're somebody who doesn't identify as neurotypical, and it's something that, you know, we co-present in one of our lived experience sessions, and we talk about language. And you mentioned in those sessions about the term neurodivergent not being something that you necessarily identify with. Can you explain that and perhaps say more about the language around neurodivergence?
Yeah, so there's kind of three terms that are used to describe this sort of thing. So there's neurotypical, which tends to be, from my point of view as someone who is not neurotypical, it's someone whose brain works generally the same way as people who don't have, you know, neurodiverse conditions, dyslexia, Tourette's, autism, ADHD, all of the other conditions. I tend to relate more to neurodiverse than neurodivergent.
Okay.
Neurodivergent to me sounds like it's more like, oh, you're different from everyone else.
Yeah.
Whereas neurodiverse just sounds more like everyone is in a diverse community and I'm part of that community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tend to use neurodiverse rather than neurodivergent. But I don't tend to use either of them particularly often. I tend to use neurotypicals because everyone else is the weird ones, not me.
And how about, you know, the terms that you kind of identify with? You talked a little bit there. What would your advice to people be about addressing people with neurodivergent conditions? How would you
Ask them how they want to be referred to. You know, other people might prefer neurodivergent to neurodiverse. In terms of autism, specifically, there's quite a lot of different ways to refer to people who have been diagnosed with autism. And there is some variation in what people prefer. I prefer I am autistic, or I'm an autistic person. I don't really like have autism and things like that. I don't carry autism around with me. Like, I don't walk around with autism next to me. Like, it's part of who I am. I am autistic. I am also Rena. Like, that it kind of all goes in the same one. Other ones are things like autist, Asperger's, they're all kind of variations on the same thing. Yeah, this poll, I found this the other week. I love this. So this is a poll on Reddit, on one of the autism subreddits. And basically someone put a poll out asking people what they prefer their autism to be referred to as. And the options were person with autism, autistic person, autist, Aspie, something else, or no real preference. 2.1 thousand people voted, and the most voted for by far is autistic person, and the next one is no real preference. So if I'm kind of similar, if I had to choose one, it would be autistic person, but ultimately I'm not overly bothered. And it just kind of goes to show that different people have different views on it. But I mean, the comments in this thread are brilliant. I love some of the comments in this thread. It goes to show the diversity of the way people like to refer to themselves.
Yeah, so we've got a couple up here. So we've got autistic person is kind of apparent. Well, my name is Autumn. I prefer to be called Autumn, and that's something that came up yesterday when we ran the full session on neurodivergence. Somebody came up with the example that their name is David, and they don't like being called Dave, and it's not really that different. So you'd correct somebody for shortening your name. So, you know, you identify as David. You don't identify as Rena with autism or autistic Rena or anything like that. You're Rena.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some others in here. I can't remember. There was one that I was particularly that we drew out yesterday, wasn't it? But I can't remember for the life of me which one it was. But it's worth a look at. If anybody does want to have a look at that poll, I will copy that and then put it in the chat. So
I think there's also the element of, you know, Asperger's is associated with Hans Asperger, who was associated with Nazism, and some people really don't like that.
Yeah.
And some people really hate that term, and other people really strongly associate with that term. So it's another reason why it's best to ask people how they prefer to be referred to, and
yes,
how they prefer their diagnosis to be referred to.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those interesting things about having an in-term. So if you identify as somebody who would refer to themselves as having Asperger's or as Aspie, that's very different from somebody referring to you as Aspie. So it very much is one of those in-terms, an in-group term that, you know, people can call each other if they're in that group, but they're not expecting it from anybody on the outside. Brilliant. Okay, so I have here a very quick video to show you. It's about 2 minutes long, and it's from a series that BBC Three produced called Things Not to Say, and it's a similar idea to what we're doing today. So it's about lived experience. So they've done a whole series on a whole load of different conditions and lived experiences. There is a bit of swearing, so if anybody is of a sensitive nature, if you just wander away for a couple of minutes, because I'm going to put the captions on as well, so I can't exactly say mute your speakers. So yeah, captions on, and as I say, it's only 2 minutes long, but I will play this, which is just some other people's experience of autism.
We can't hear it.
Oh, that's because I didn't share my sound, because we're not on Zoom today, we're on Teams. Go back.
Yeah, got it.
I've touched the bowl. I'm so eager.
Okay, what we got here?
We have got.
Oh, I get this a lot.
You know what it is? It's like. That's how I feel. Do it.
You don't look autistic.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, I have got that one. I've got people say to me, oh, you look fine, Leanne.
I think if I had £1 for every time somebody had said to me, you don't look autistic, I could afford a real tan.
They mean well, because I think what that means is I had these preconceptions and you've just broken them, and I find that really interesting. But how it's actually come out is quite stigmatizing.
They think of someone with autism and they think of your typical Sheldon Cooper type, or someone who doesn't speak to anyone, who's rude, who's a genius, and that simply isn't the case.
There's definitely a media image of how autistic people are portrayed.
It's always men or children.
No, I
It's
agree,
like,
yeah.
Where's the girls?
I mean, there is, I think, something called savant syndrome where people do have these like amazing gifts that they've been given. But I think a lot of these like special abilities come from being very, very, very interested in something.
I have let down autism. I am shit at maths, all right? Don't ever ask me to do the times table because I will miserably fucking fail.
Everyone is a little autistic.
Ah, do you know what? That really, I'm sorry, that really pisses me off.
This is where I want one of those eye roll emojis.
So we're taught in school we've got 5 senses. Wrong, we've got 6. The 6th one being our theory of mind, the ability to understand everybody else's thought processes.
You don't have that instinctive
And
understanding
we rely
of
on people's body
or
language,
anything.
and they lie with their body language.
They
And that
do.
just makes me angry.
So if you have the ability to do that, please don't ever say you could be a little bit autistic.
Yeah,
because
just
it really
don't,
is.
just stop.
Autistic people don't feel empathy.
Oh, fuck off.
I actually believe that autistic people feel too much empathy.
We do feel empathy. We do understand your emotions. We're not thick. If anything, we feel things much harder.
For me, it's very hard to sometimes put myself in another person's shoes.
Yeah.
And people mistake that
Yeah,
for a lack of
thank you,
empathy.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that was just some other lived experience, a little bit lighthearted. I hope you all took it to say it in the lighthearted manner it was meant. But just to cover a little bit about neurodivergence, and I'm using neurodivergence just as a kind of the term that I would use within the charity. So yeah, bearing in mind what Marina has said about how she identifies with that term, and obviously kind of as a kind of clear example of how individual preference should override generalizations. So what we once saw as learning disabilities or difficulties are now better understood as normal differences in the way that people's brains develop, and it's highly probable that they played an essential part of our evolution as a species. You may have also heard the term neurodiverse or neurodiversity, but it is a term that is sometimes replaced by this neurodivergence, although I have to say it's unlikely you're going to be misunderstood if you use either or if you use them interchangeably. Essentially, the term changed as neurodiverse refers to a population that consists of both neurodivergent and neurotypical individuals. SPLD is another term that's been used and has gone from specific learning disorder to specific learning difficulty to specific learning difference, again showing that evolution of language, and thank goodness the letter D is so versatile. What does neurodivergence cover? Well, we talked very briefly, and I will just rattle these off. Obviously, if this was a longer session, we could go into a little more detail, but dyslexia, dyslexia is a condition that causes difficulties with the decoding of word sounds. So it's more common in English speakers, as English contains many letter combinations that make different sounds when used in different words. And interestingly, studies have demonstrated that people who are blind can also be dyslexic. So that lends more evidence to the fact that it's a phonetic rather than a visual condition. Then we've got dyspraxia, more commonly known now as developmental coordination disorder, or DCD. This has people with DCD have difficulties with coordination and fine motor control, which typically manifests in things like scruffy handwriting, clumsiness, and DCD also has strong links to difficulties with organisation. So all you mind mapping people out there, mind mapping is a fantastic bit of technology to support people with DCD in general. Then we have dyscalculia. So dyscalculia is effectively number dyslexia. It's called number dyslexia by lots of people, and some argue that the two conditions shouldn't really be separated, that dyslexia is dyslexia. Dysgraphia. So dysgraphia is a transcription difficulty that impacts handwriting and is incredibly difficult to diagnose because of the links with dyspraxia. So it's very difficult to say what dyspraxia would be in terms of the fine motor control and the impact that would have on handwriting. And we've got ADHD. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You might also be familiar with the terms ADD or ADHD with the H in brackets. Those have now generally disappeared. It's still used. It's an older term that's still used, but effectively it's been branched out into ADHD is the common term, and then there are subcategories of that, but I'm not going to go into that. Then we have Tourette's syndrome. So that's considered a neurodivergent condition. Most of us are probably aware of Tourette's, involving spontaneous swearing and tics and that sort of thing. Actually, the swearing side of things is relatively rare and affects approximately 1 in 10 cases of Tourette's. And then we move to autism, or autism spectrum condition. It's a lifelong developmental disability that affects how a person communicates and relates to other people and how they experience the world around them. That's from the National Autistic Society. So autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is sometimes used, particularly within medicine and healthcare, but the use of condition is sometimes preferred over disorder, as disorder obviously implies there is something wrong with a person. You may also have heard terms like high functioning autistic or Asperger's. Now, high functioning isn't a particularly popular phrase, as it kind of implies person has autism, but they're lucky because they're really good at maths. And Asperger's is a term that, as Rena said, has fallen from favour, largely due to the problematic history that Hans Asperger has, and also it's a diagnosis that was included in 1994 and was dropped in 2013. So it's kind of fallen from favour within the diagnostic and the medical community, but there may still be people that identify as with things like Asperger's or the term Aspie, as we talked about. Now, just to kind of finish that off, the difficulties experienced by people who are neurodivergent have arguably only really arisen from expecting everyone to learn or work in the same way. So, for example, dyslexia has only really presented a barrier since the development of the printing press and book-based learning. Before that, a dyslexic apprentice could learn by observing and copying and probably faced relatively few barriers. So, over to you, Rena. Can you share some prior examples of where kind of this taking of a one-size-fits-all approach to working has been problematic for you?
Yeah, so I had a couple of internships before I started at AbilityNet. One of them was part-time and one of them was full-time. And the full-time one was done through like an internship program for people with disabilities. So, you know, you'd think that it would be, you know, really flexible and people would be understanding, but maybe not. I didn't get that many adjustments. I had to work in an office, which was, I find it quite difficult to work in an office. I can't control my environment, the lights, the smells, the sounds, they're all very distracting and it stops me from like focusing on what I'm doing. And if I can't focus on what I'm doing, I don't do very good work. I got burnt out after about 3 weeks of this 3-month internship, and I had a meltdown, and that it got to the point where I either had to quit or I had to go and ask for something different that was quite drastic. So I changed from working 5 days a week in an office to working, I think it was 3 days a week from home and 2 days a week in the office. I didn't feel like comfortable asking for the adjustments. The organisation that I was placed with, I didn't feel like they were very accepting. They didn't feel that flexible. I'd seen an article they'd put in their diversity newsletter that said, we congratulate this manager for taking on a disabled intern. And I'm sitting there going, why is this an important part? Like, surely they're just being congratulated for taking on an intern, or am I more trouble than someone else? So I guess kind of lots of different things you know, went into the you know, the feeling that I wasn't really accepted and I had to fit their mold, I guess. I can give loads more examples, but I'll stop there because we haven't got a lot of time.
I also know,
Adam, can I just ask
yeah.
a question? Sorry. So on that, so they were aware that you obviously that you had autism, but
Yeah.
they were sort of praising themselves for taking you on, kind of thing.
They were praising themselves for taking on a disabled intern. Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got that the right way around. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. In their diversity and inclusion newsletter, yes.
Yeah. Now, I know from prior chats with you, Rena, that you employ the spoon and fork theory in life, and it's a theory that you've explained, and I love. So can you explain to everyone how that works?
Yeah, so they're kind of two different theories. So one's to do with kind of stresses and the other one's to do with energy. So spoon theory is to do with energy. You get a set number of spoons at the beginning of the day, and everything that you do, and I mean literally everything, getting up out of bed, getting dressed, having a shower, brushing your teeth, making your breakfast, getting to work, doing your work, everything, putting your glasses on takes a spoon. And all you can do is use up your spoons. When you've run out of spoons, you can either choose to take more from the next day, which means you can then do less the next day, or you can choose to just not do anything and maybe do something that will replenish your spoons. And so in terms of like spoon theory, things like getting to work, traveling to work, working in an office, having to socialize with people in an office face to face, and spending all that energy working out, you know, what are people saying, what do they want me to do, what am I supposed to act like in this office, all of those sorts of things take up spoons. If I can work from home, I don't have to spend those. I can spend those spoons on doing good work.
Mhm.
And then the fork theory kind of goes hand in hand, but it's slightly different. So the fork theory is more about stresses. So you only have so much space on your body, and everything that kind of stresses you out a little bit or a lot sticks a fork into you, and some are big forks and some are little forks. So to give you an example, you know, you might have lighting that's affecting like your sensory kind of side of things, that it's too bright or it flickers or something. You might have I don't know, a smell from lunch that you don't like, all those sorts of things. And then you have to go in for a talk with your manager that you think might be a bit of a difficult talk. You need to get rid of a spoon somewhere. So it might be not a spoon, a fork, sorry. It might be, you know, turning the light off, and then you can deal with the conversation. But it's that kind of balancing of what can I deal with today? You know, can I deal with having a shower and having this difficult meeting, and making my own dinner, or am I going to have to order takeaway so that I can have the meeting, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I find that quite a useful way of describing how everything is like a balancing act, and having adjustments at work can mean that actually I can work for the first thing and I can do good work for the second thing, which are both important to keeping and having a job, basically, and functioning.
So, I mean, AbilityNet have always been focused on supporting colleagues and clients through implementation of individual reasonable adjustments. But in recent years, we've been working with clients to move the focus to be more zoned in on their working practices and how to make them inclusive and flexible for everyone. So can you tell us what kind of flexible, inclusive working means for you at AbilityNet, and maybe touch on the role of technology, if it plays a role in that?
I mean, I think if I touch on the technology first, I think that kind of goes side by side with my job. I mean, I work with assistive technologies every day, so I kind of have access to a lot of assistive technologies anyway. But things like, you know, allowing people to change the settings on their device, you know, things like dark mode, night mode, brightness of their screens, that sort of stuff, text size. If people can change that for themselves, that helps in itself. And then, you know, you might have something that you can just provide like a company-wide access to. You know, maybe it would be a piece of technology called read and write gold, text something gold, can't remember the name, but basically, yeah, that's the one. It gives you a bunch of different things. It can read stuff out to you, you can highlight stuff, you can change the color of the screen, all of those sorts of things. I did work for one organization where they had it available for everyone. And it tends to be suggested for people with things like dyslexia. You know, it was suggested to me when I went through DSA for uni because of my dyslexia, but it can actually help loads of other people. You know, if someone's really stressed and they're really struggling to read like an article that they need to read for work, having it read to them might just get them over the line for the piece of work that they need to submit, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It can help with proofreading. If someone's writing a report, if it proofreads it for them, then they can spot the errors in there, and you know, it'll be generally better English. Those sorts of things can just help generally. And then in terms of working, I know I haven't come to the working environment yet, so I'll do that now. Before I get carried away. Working environment, there's loads of things that you can do that cost nothing, like just being like open and saying, you know, tell us if you want any changes, flexible working from home, you know, being open to moving people's hours around if they need to, I don't know, have a hospital appointment. Loads of disabled people have loads of doctor's appointments. I do. I've got so many. It's so annoying. But just having that, like, you know, if I have a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, my manager will go, okay, it's fine, just work those 2 hours somewhere else in the week. You know, and that can make a huge difference. And being aware of people's stress levels, having that kind of awareness and open conversation with your staff about, you know, how are you getting on? Are you finding it stressful? How's your workload? Is there anything we can do to help you with that, and that sort of thing? And just, if you start these conversations, people will then feel like they're more able to ask for adjustments when they do want them.
Yeah. There was something I was going to, when you were talking there, I was thinking, because quite often we hear from people, you know, we're a small organisation, or we don't have much budget and we can't afford to make significant adjustments in the workplace. But it really is about making simple, very inexpensive, often free adjustments to working environments that's going to encourage people to firstly feel like that sense of, that all-important sense of belonging to an organization. But also, if you're championing the sorts of things that are available to everybody, it makes it a much easier environment for somebody to come forward and say, look, this is brilliant, you've got this, but I was just wondering if I could. And then they'll give you those additional adjustments. And the same is true if you're putting on an event or something like that. If you're championing the considerations that you've put in place, you know, you've said, right, there's going to be a break halfway through, or there's going to be captions, there's going to be recording available, all those sorts of things. What it actually does to people is say, right, these things have been thought about, so clearly I'm somebody who this company cares about, so now I'm going to come forward and feel comfortable coming forward and saying, oh, would you mind, I don't know, getting the slides to me early, or something like that. So all these key adjustments and the simplicity behind them.
I was just going to say, Adam, on that. So Rena mentioned about the, you know, the tools to help use software, for example, and how that can benefit people that, you know, don't necessarily have the challenges. It might be, I've got a migraine or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. It's the same as well about that working environment, isn't it? It's about, you know, if you're making the working environment, to your point, more welcoming, that might help Rena, for example, it also helps everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, there's an uplift. It's not, I want to say, it's not dead debt or anything like that. You know, if you're helping with the environment or with the software, not only does it help people who may have some challenges, it also helps those who may not be having challenges, or may have a temporary challenge like a headache, or whatever, you know.
Absolutely.
So I think that to me is something to just sort of emphasize there, the importance of, you know, it's not making necessarily sacrifices or adjustments to fit one or two individuals. Everybody will benefit if you put those in place. So I just wanted to call that out.
You're not forcing people to disclose in order to access, and you're also getting a more productive, more comfortable working environment for everybody. Yeah, I'm one of those people who, I recognize that if I'm in a rush, I make a lot of mistakes in what I'm typing, but I've got access to text-to-speech software, so I will play something back while I'm getting on with something else. I can hear what I'm writing back. Now, I don't identify as neurodivergent. I don't have any, you know, I'm not dyslexic to my knowledge, but I still have that tool available that helps me out, because I face a barrier, certainly when I'm under pressure, that I will make silly mistakes. And it's exactly as you say, it's a universal adjustment. So,
one thing I found really interesting was loads of organisations pre-COVID were like, oh no, you can't work from home, we can't do that. COVID comes along, you're all working from home. Hang on a minute, you just told me you couldn't do that.
yeah. And the number of people who were championing how quickly they adjusted. So there was
Yeah.
a case of somebody on Twitter who'd been for a job with somebody who said, sorry, yeah, they were disabled. That I think they were in a wheelchair, and they were told that they couldn't. I can't remember what the excuse. It wasn't an out and out kind of discrimination case. It was the way it was put, that they couldn't allow working from home. And that same organisation a couple of weeks later was straight front and centre championing how quickly they'd adjusted to home working, and having said to somebody, no, we can't employ you because you'll need to work from home. So, right, moving on. What have we got here? So, yeah, what do you put your success at AbilityNet down to? So obviously you joined us, Rena, and you've kind of jumped up through the ranks and are quite a significant player in AbilityNet's little pond. So what kind of what do you put that down to, apart from hard work, obviously?
I think the main thing that I put that down to is the flexibility and understanding that I've experienced here. You know, it's not that, and it's that I've had specific adjustments. You know, I work from home permanently. I did it before COVID. I will do it after COVID. But a lot of it is down to just, like, you know, everyone in the organization appreciates that people work differently. You know, everyone in the organization appreciates that not everyone will want to be called out of the blue randomly without checking that they're not busy. Those sorts of things. And it's that understanding and that just attitude to people's general differences, not to people's disabilities, but just general differences in people, has made me feel like I'm valued, that I'm part of the community. It allows me to get on with my work. I'm happier inside and out of work because I'm achieving. You know, I've been able to be more productive. I've had, you know, okay, there are instances where I have to take sick leave from work because something's happened outside of work and it's too big a fork to deal with, but it's happened a whole lot less than it would have if I was working for an organization that wasn't understanding. That if I had loads of forks from work, I'd have a much smaller fork that caused me to go off sick with stress. You know, and I can bring an alternative perspective to things. I can suggest things that other people might not think of because of the different way I see the world. And there's so many benefits that you can get out of people with disabilities, not just people with neurodiversity or anything like that. People with disabilities have a different view on the world. You know, they've experienced different things just like everyone else, but that they're often disregarded because they're too much work, in inverted commas. You know, oh, this person needs loads of adjustments. No, we're not going to bother with that. That's far too much work. And then you lose that perspective on life and on the work. And I think that's a really valuable perspective to have.
Okay, brilliant. So just kind of final point before we kind of move on to some kind of more questions from the audience. I haven't seen anything come in, so I'm hoping there are people are waiting to ask things. But just very quickly, obviously we're with BASDA today, so we've got to touch on specific software. So what are some specific kind of assistive technologies that you like using? And it's not like it's a question that I've sprung on you. We've got the list here. So do you want to talk us through some of these and why you find them useful? We've covered text to speech actually, so if we start at
I'll
speech
skip
text.
that one. So assistive technologies wise, things like speech to text, that's like dictation, so it's almost the opposite of text to speech. I can brain dump into a Word document and you know, I can then go into it and look at it and organize it. If I want, I can organize it onto a mind map, just having it on a piece of paper without having to type it out, because I'll be honest, I am not the fastest typer in the world. That is so much more useful, especially when my mind is going at like 1,000,000 miles an hour. Reminders, to-dos and alarms. I have a really bad memory. I I cannot remember stuff. You know, having my meetings in Outlook with reminders coming up, because quite regularly I'll have a reminder from Outlook like, you've got a meeting in 15 minutes. I'm like, have I? So those sorts of things are really useful, and you know, again, that's free. You don't need to pay for a specific piece of technology for people to get reminders. You know, that sort of stuff is easy to provide to everyone, and everyone will benefit from it.
Brilliant. So do you want to now move on to if we've had any? I've got one question here, but have you got any that have come in, Pauline, that you want to?
Yeah, well, we do have some questions, and so I'll read them off, and hopefully you can help answer them. So obviously, you know, we're BASDA a software association, so we're aware of the WAG requirements, but I guess, you know, as we're software, how do we think neurodiversity when we're thinking of those WAG ones? Because, you know, I think one of the, it's very easy to understand, you know, a blind person's challenge and hard of hearing challenge, and you can think about how you develop the software that way. But I guess when it comes to something like neurodiversity, it's like, well, how can we think about helping there? And I know that's a very broad question, and you probably like, we need another 6 hours to answer that. But you know, if you could sort of give us a little bit of pointers on there, because you know, I think that's one of the challenges from a software developer is, you know, some things are maybe a little bit easier to visualize and see how you can help, but maybe the challenge is with neurodiversity. How can you think about that to improve your software?
I think the main thing for me is simplicity. Don't overload me with information. If there's a lot of information for me to have, separate it out, put it under different headings. Even if you can, collapse it, you know, in like accordion sections so that I can get rid of the stuff that I'm not paying attention to right now. You know, colors, for me, bright colors can be quite overwhelming. But equally, you need to pay attention to color contrast. So finding a color that's not really, really bright, but also has enough contrast, and I get that that's a balancing act. It takes a bit of time to work out what you need, but having that kind of appreciation that just because it looks good doesn't mean that it'll be nice for everyone to use. Give me instructions. You know, if you've got a bunch of form fields and there's like date fields and no format, you know, I live in the UK. Okay, it's probably in this date format. I put it in, it doesn't work. It's like wrong format. I'm like, right, okay, what is the right format? Am I going to have to try 16 different date formats to make it work? So giving me instructions on what to put in. Moving content can be really, really distracting. Having something moving out of the corner of my eye can mean that I can't focus on something. So, I mean, first of all, don't put it in. But if you really, 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 really must have it, let me pause it. At the very least, let me pause it so that I can focus on what I'm supposed to be doing here. And then time limits. I'm like Adam, I'm really bad under pressure. I'm so bad under exams. Oh God, don't get me started on exams. But you know, time limits for checking out on a, you know, a shopping site. There's no need for that. You don't need to put a time limit on me purchasing this thing. Like if it's not,
I think I do. I want you through this door by the end of the day.
If it's not in stock by the time I've finished, then fine, I'll go somewhere else. But
so,
if you
go on, carry on. No, carry on.
If you put a time limit on it, and you know, I'm feeling stressed already, there's a good chance that I'll give up and won't carry on, you know, and then you're definitely going to lose my business rather than potentially going to lose my business in case it's out of stock, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that was sort of what you said there is actually really useful, because one of the questions we had is, you know, sort of a lot of our members are relatively small developers, so you know they're restricted with the amount of developers that they have, so it's much more challenging for them to do it. So it was like, you know, some of those small wins that can help them move along there, that would be really good. So I think you've already shared a couple of those sort of quick wins about, you know, thinking about the contrast. I know I struggle with red and black red
Yeah.
letters on black or vice versa. And I really struggle with that. And it's simple things like that, as you said. And again, it's that uplift, not just if you have some neurodiversity challenges. I don't think I have any of those challenges. Maybe I do. But it's that kind of thing. It helps the broader population as well.
Yeah.
And I think from a software developer's point of view, it's not about, I want to say, catering for a limited audience, and I use those caveats very much with that. It's about the benefits of helping support that sort of part of the market, but it also has the broader benefits. So anything like that can really help people with challenges. It also helps those that maybe don't have a challenge or don't perceive a challenge.
It's that notion of the bell curve. So you solve for the outliers and you extend it to cover everybody. And look at the and the things that Rena's just gone through there, and the points that are also covered on the slides. Everything there, if you flip it and take out the condition or the diagnosis, there's still useful things. Nobody wants unclear instructions. Nobody wants unnecessary time limits. Nobody wants to have moving content that they can't switch off. It's about giving that choice, and it's also about building it in at those early stages. So it's far, far more expensive to produce a piece of software or to design a website and then tag accessibility on as one of the final hurdles before you release it to the world. If you bring it at design stage, you are going to cover that off, you're going to save yourself money, and you're going to produce a much, much better product.
Yeah, and again, just re-emphasizing to the broadest possible audience that you're going to do that. So that's great. Excellent. I think we did sort of cover it off at the beginning. So one of the other questions we had is, when we're working with people who may have autism in the team, how do I engage with them without trying to offend? So I think we did cover that, but I think it's just worth re-emphasizing, Adam. It's like, how do you want to be referred to? So I'm not going to call you Ad. It's like, I couldn't think how much further I could shorten your name then, but it might be it might be you say, hey, I'm happy if you call me A, or something like that. So it's about understanding how that person wants to be engaged. Same as how do you introduce yourself as a name, kind of thing. And so is there any other sort of tips that you've got on that, Arena? Is there anything that you wanted to sort of add on how can we approach you without offending?
I mean, first of all, like, I'm still a person.
Are you sure?
Talk to me like you would talk to anyone else.
Sure.
You could even, if you want to ask if people with disabilities want adjustments or think that they would find any changes useful, ask everyone. And then everyone gets the opportunity to say that, regardless of whether they have disclosed or not. And I guarantee that there will be people without disabilities who will say, actually, this would be really useful. And I can guarantee there will be people who haven't disclosed who will ask for something still without disclosing. There's a whole range of it. And if you just kind of, again, it's very much about, talking to people, asking, how do they want to be referred to, what do they think would help them, those sorts of things. Are they just open the conversation, and you will get people who, once you've started that conversation, will go, well, actually, I have this condition, I actually think this would be really useful. And you might get some people who are actually really relieved because they weren't sure how to disclose. They weren't sure whether they would be, accepted for who they were and that sort of stuff.
No, that's really good.
We've got a question that's come in on the Slido here. So
go ahead.
Some companies pride themselves in a long and complex process, so recruitment process that ends up excluding people. What are issues to tackle during recruitment as a candidate? So I think, Rena, this kind of points towards what was your experience like coming for interview here versus somewhere else. I know you've had a couple of stories, I think. But...
Yeah. So if I start with AbilityNet, we have like a 3-step process, and I think it was like the second step or something. It was a telephone interview, and I asked for the questions in advance because particularly in pressurized situations, my brain goes blank. If I can get the questions in advance, I can process that question. Whereas, you know, someone else might be able to process that in the interview. I can't do that. And it's not about giving me an advantage. It's about giving me equality. And the response to that question was, oh no, it's fine, here's the questions, just email your answers back. And I'm like, this is brilliant. This is like the best start to anything ever. In comparison, I'd previously had a telephone interview with I think it was like an internship or something, and they asked me a question and I gave them the answer, and they said, oh, not quite, it was a technical interview, so it was like coding or something. And I said the same thing in different words. And they were a bit closer, try again. Same thing, more different words. Yeah, that's about right. I'm like, I've literally said the same thing 3 times. How is that any different to what I first said? And you know, it's about appreciating that people will approach it in different ways. But if they've got the general gist of the answer right, then great. You know, it doesn't need to be in specific words. You know, everyone will answer it differently regardless of whether they've got a neurodiverse condition or not. But again, just being open to providing adjustments for people if they go through the interview, and even if they don't, you know, asking everyone who comes for an interview, is there anything that we can do to make this process easier for you?
I'm just thinking, I've got a similar example of that kind of nonsensical interview. So I went for, as the long bio at the start touched on, I was an assistant psychologist for a while, and I used to run the psychometrics. So I went along to an interview, and I was presented with one of these personality tests. And I said to the person, I'm familiar with this. Do you want me to answer it as I know you want the answers, or do you want me to answer it truthfully? Because they're going to be 2 very different outcomes. And said, oh no, answer it truthfully. I answered it truthfully, and I got the feedback, sorry, we didn't get the job because the results of your psychometric test. And it was one of those that, I knew what you were after, but actually you've disadvantaged me by, you know, effectively providing me with the wrong information.
I don't like those tests, by the way. I'm always worried that it's going to find out that I'm a really weird person, which I probably am, but I don't want to be told that. Thank you.
Never fear the weird, just embrace it.
Again, those psychometric tests can be really bad for autistic people. You know, they test how you would deal with situations, and they're based on a neurotypical's experience. You know, we're going to approach tasks in a completely different way. Doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's any worse than the way that someone else would do it, but because we approach it in a different way, someone else will pass it and we won't, because it's not geared towards autistic people, it's geared towards neurotypical people.
It's normed to those.
Yes, and I think that's a great shout. As I say, they scare the bejesus out of me, but that might be more about me, so we won't go down my own personal issues here. But yeah, I haven't got any more questions. I don't know if you have, Adam, but
nothing more's come through.
So, no, that's good. Well, I just wanted to thank you both for your time. And just before you go, I just wanted to point out, so I'm the chair of the Abilities Special Interest Group here at BASDA, and I'm delighted to say that AbilityNet are going to come along, or one of them, I don't think the whole company's coming along, as my vice chair going forward. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to working with you all much more closely and helping share sort of this education, for want of a better description, with our members. So thank you again for that, and hopefully everybody who's attended here has got as much out of this as I have. So really do appreciate your time and honesty and openness here. So again, to the members, thank you for taking part and joining us through here, and hopefully you'll join us again for some other ones. The recording will be made available, so we will be sending that out at some point in the next few days. I can see people typing, so this might be interesting. Hope they're saying, wrap it up now. You should have finished minutes ago.
Don't invite these people back again.
Yes, that's probably just me, so don't worry about that, Adam. They're invite you two back, but not me. So yes,
That's been brilliant. And Addy is joining as co-chair
Addy, thank you.
Yes, so
I-
Addy Latif.
As I said, I'm rubbish at names, so
Yeah. No problem. He's an absolute nightmare, so we probably have to bring a second person along just to control him. So yeah.
Oh, I think we could cause chaos together. Great. So that I'm looking forward to that now. So yes. So thank you everyone for taking part in this. Thank you again, Adam and Arena, for taking part. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again. So thank you. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.